coming to you raw and unscripted. Beaming across Ontario and beyond to places like Maryvale, Whaley's Corner, Port Maitland, and Tweed. This is the Real Hickson Real Estate Podcast. Whether you're listening on your commute or putting on your suit, whether it's your morning stroll or you're on patrol, you just finished prayer or dropped the kids at daycare, you're in the bar, your car, or listening with the bathroom door ajar, near or far, this is the Jess and Giro Show. We're grateful for flattery and prone to inaccuracies. This is your guide to Toronto culture, people, events, news, but most importantly, real estate talk. Yes, hello folks. We're back, and we have Jess.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we have a special guest, Jason Katz. Say hello, Jason.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Now, we're in the office here at Forest Hill Legacy, and Jason, you want to just do a little bio, just a little intro for yourself?
Sure. Well, my name is Jason Katz, and I'm the Director of Sales and Operations for Forest Hill Legacy. Currently, we have 3 brokerages, Aurora location, we have this location here in Vaughan, and we also have St. Clair and Witchwood in Toronto. My day-to-day responsibility is mentoring and leading agents, as well as running my personal real estate business.
And making bold predictions.
Yes.
Which I've mentioned, like not by name, but I have mentioned, I would say like an agent in the office has this kind of thing to say. And they've been pretty accurate, Jason. And that's kind of why we wanted to have you on the show. Now, you're quite knowledgeable, you've had businesses before, and I just feel like your intent is good, I like your style, I like your energy most importantly, and of course your experience and your mind. But we're going to be talking today about the future of real estate.
Just a small conversation.
Conversation. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's nice to talk about where we've been, and we will do that. It's nice to talk about what's happening today in the moment. But it's also nice to look ahead and try and anticipate the unanticipatable. Is that a word?
Yes, it is.
Is that an actual word?
Yeah.
I nailed it. Fantastic.
It is.
So we always like to start off with what's happening in the market, Jason.
Well, I would say currently we're seeing example after example of good-looking property coming to market, priced properly, that looks fantastic so that everybody gets excited. And these properties are selling within a day or two, regularly, consistently. And the message that is sending to the rest of the market is do not wait until everybody does the same thing at the same time.
Oh, we've heard that before, haven't we, Jess?
Right, because this is
the case,
this is the plan right now. Everybody's thinking we're going to wait until it gets warm. We can do some nice photography, and they don't realize that if they put their product on the market right now, they're going to capitalize on those people that are out in the market. They've decided they're going to buy this year, and they see a house. It's early in the season. They both scratch their heads and look at each other and say, "Honey, if we don't buy this house, we're not going to find another house like this later in the year.
Yeah.
So let's get it now."
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on your situation. That caters to a specific market. And I think specifically now in the GTA or in Toronto as well, especially, there are certain pockets that are experiencing a lot of action.
Yes.
Just based on the fact that historically it's hard to get into these pockets.
Most certainly.
And the market does differ though. So if we were to talk about renters, I feel like the rentals are quite busy right now. Depending on that market, we've experienced these shifts of people moving away from Toronto, then moving back to Toronto.
Yes.
Now we're in a bit of an interesting period where it's like push and pull factors. If you were to look outside of Toronto, again, that's a completely different market. First-time home buyers, Jason, that's probably the most positive news. And I'm surprised, and it's a little sad that we don't see more news articles. You know what? Because it's so uncertain right now. And there's so much question mark. I think I read a study yesterday that there's a website that has, economic uncertainty factors, right? And they do all these factors and all
Right.
these calculations, and they work out this score of like how uncertain things are right now. And I think we're like the highest we've ever been, higher than the pandemic.
Yes.
You know what I mean? With all what's happening in the US, et cetera, et cetera. But no one's talking about how interest rates have come down. Okay, so now we have more buying power. Borrowing's a little bit easier and cheaper. And also prices have come down, especially in the entry-level market. And that we have a fantastic opportunity for first-time home buyers.
Yes.
No one's talking about that.
I think people are sitting on their hands because anytime you've got a decreasing interest rate environment, it leads the buyer to ask the question, what if I wait?
Right.
Yeah.
If I wait, are rates going to come back down? And we know that historically, when rates come down, the prices go up.
Yeah.
Might not be instantly, but that's the pattern that we see.
But I feel like we hit a threshold. It's because that was the bold prediction that you made last year. And you were like, when the interest rates start to come down, this is before they started coming down, you said, are they going to jump off the fence right away? I think some people might have. But the trends, we like to talk about the trends, the majority of people. And then you said, but they're going to ask themselves, do we wait? If we wait, does it come down? I think that's true. And then I think we hit a threshold of like, it's this fear of overpaying, and we talk about it all the time, versus the fear of missing out.
Correct.
Now, in the busy markets that we had in the last 3 or 4 years, we had a lot of the fear of missing out,
Yes.
which turned into the fear of overpaying, which came with the inflation, the cost of living, blah, blah, blah. And now we're looking at like unemployment rate going up as well. So all that to say that, people are hesitant
Cautious.
and cautious.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I would say that this period of time that we're now going into reminds me very much of the pandemic. And it reminds me very much of the lessons that were learned during the pandemic. And most importantly with my clients, the lesson that was learned was that do not let this external factor get in your head. If you were thinking of making a move to go into a house where you were actually going to be living and raising your family, because you need that house regardless of what's going on.
Yeah.
So there were a number of people during that pandemic that decided they were going to sit on their hands. We're not going to do real estate. It's impossible to transact. We're not doing virtual showings. We're not jumping on this bandwagon. And those people, their lives just kind of sat dormant. Whereas I had lots of clients who recognized that we could be trusted to keep everybody safe and that we were going to operate within these new parameters that nobody had ever done before.
Yeah.
And we had to adapt really quickly. And I can tell you that all the clients that I had that made those moves during that pandemic are extremely happy that they did.
Yeah.
Because they're living in their homes and they're living their lives and they're not part of the group who's still sitting on their hands thinking, is now the time for me to jump in the market?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I said, the longer these people wait, when everybody does the same thing at the same time, that's when they're going to pay.
Yeah. I mean, Warren Buffett says, when people are being scared, be greedy. When people are being greedy, be scared. I think that's a simple rule to live by. And that's pretty much what you're saying right there.
Absolutely.
And I don't know why that is. I've been here 10 years now. I'm a proud Canadian. This podcast is Canadian made, by the way.
Love it.
Shop local. Still a couple of things I need to figure out. One is Canadians, I feel, and of course this is evolving every year, and it's city to city, it's a little different, and neighborhood to neighborhood, but I just feel like, 2 questions. Why do Canadians seem to follow the trends only? They're a little afraid to take risks. And second part of that question is, I just feel inherently, especially when it comes to finances, they're quite conservative. Can you answer that question?
Well, I think the conservative bit about finances has to do with the tone that's been set by the bank, right? It's the tone of having to be approved at 2% higher than the rate that you're going to be, the rate that you're going to actually paying. You know, and when we were up in the 6s and people are being approved at 8% plus, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Who would ever be able to be approved at that number?
Well, okay, so first-time home buyers is going to be good. Upgraders are kind of in the same market, except that for upgraders, they also have to sell, which can be a struggle, and especially if they're trying to sell their condo. How are you seeing the condo market right now, Jason?
Condo market has been on sale for over a year now.
Yeah.
We've had values in the condo markets dipping, maybe to the tune of about 3 to 5% per year. And I've got investors who are now making those purchases and scooping those up because they know people need a place to live.
Yeah, and speaking of investors, there was a time when these properties were cash flow positive. Then there was a time where it's like you're breaking even, but investors in the last couple of years at the very least, and that's not even talking about pre-construction or anything like that, it's just accepted that it's going to be cash flow negative for a little while, for a period of time. How long that period of time is, we're not sure, and you obviously have to do the calculations. Until the rates change. Isn't that what you're finding as well?
I am. A lot of those investors that you're referencing were on variable-based mortgages.
Yeah.
So when they started to increase, that level of profitability really did disappear for a lot of them.
And, just to touch on pre-construction, we've been talking about that. That's probably the market that's hurting the most. Okay, the condo market has been struggling for a little while now, but at least if you have someone renting it out or you're living in it yourself, it's neither here nor there. Everyone's in a slightly different position. But these people that were buying pre-construction at, inflated rates in the last couple of years, again, it's that process of, okay, we're making a little bit of profit. They're trying to sell it by assignment, or they're closing and trying to resell it, or they can't close because they can't get the mortgage for it because the interest rates were so high. And, okay, we take a little bit of profit. Then, okay, we're going to break even. And now we're seeing, the appraisals coming in lower.
Yep.
And that basically means that they have to come up with that extra amount because the banks or the lenders won't give them that money. If they're lucky, they can walk away, from these builders.
Yeah.
But it's tough out there, right?
Absolutely it is. Anybody who purchased anything pre-construction over the past 4 years is definitely at risk. As the units are not appraising. And the numbers that I'm seeing for big buildings downtown Toronto, they're missing by 25%.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's the number.
Well, I don't know. When we were seeing these projects coming out, I've always had a question mark about pre-construction. I've had plenty of people ask me about it. I've never been convinced. But ironically, now it actually makes more sense than it did before. We were seeing numbers coming out. And listen, it'll get back there. But we were seeing numbers in Yorkville, like 1,400 a square foot, 1,600 a square foot, 18.
I saw 2,000.
That's correct. And how is this viable? Well, obviously there's very different sizes, but we're talking about like 350 square foot units now.
Yep.
Which is crazy. So you're like, okay, on the surface level, the condo was do quick math. Like 350 at 14.
Or at 14.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's still a reasonable number to look at on surface value, whether it's like 650, 700,000. But what are you actually buying? You're only buying 350 square feet. Will people in the future, that's a good segue on the topic. Yeah. Will people in the future live in those properties?
And what will it cost monthly for them?
Well, it costs monthly for them.
Are they going to pay $2,500 a month for 350 square feet?
Well, that's it.
I think the condos you're referencing specifically in Yorkville, they've got a very different buyer.
Yeah.
They really do. And people who want to live in those buildings have a very specific lifestyle that is really dialed in to that area. It's an expensive life.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Your grocery store is the most expensive place.
Oh, yeah. If you want to eat, it's an expensive life.
If you want to do anything, you want to park.
Yeah, but I guess everyone has different objectives and different values, right?
True.
And then just finishing off kind of the current stuff that's happening now, I want to speak a little bit on the downsizing market.
Well, with our aging population, as more and more people decide that they no longer want to do stairs, that really seems to be the driving factor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I've had townhomes that we actually furnished with wheel lifts so that we can lift people up the stairs,
Right.
that kind of thing. And you know, you've got the government that is toting this aging at home strategy where they want people to remain in their homes for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And they want them to get their homes retrofitted so that maybe they get cork floors so that if they fall, they don't hurt themselves.
Right.
You know, so different things like that. But at the end of the day, you know, when the family makes a decision that, you know, mom can't do the stairs anymore and she's got to go into a one-level condo or maybe a first-floor condo.
And they're not building bungalows like they used to.
They're not. Absolutely not.
Plenty of townhomes. That's like the number one thing, townhomes.
With lots of stairs.
With lots of stairs. Now, if you're lucky, I've seen plenty of townhomes coming out with elevators.
Yes.
So that's a huge thing. But of course, like...
Usually about the 1.7 to 2 million mark.
Yeah.
Not
For
the
those
average.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And why do you think the government, instead of maybe building more retirement, you know, facilities, et cetera, why do you think they're asking people to pass in their own home?
Well, I mean, I think the whole retirement facility piece is something that, you know, over the past 20 years, that whole segment has received a very negative kind of connotation. Any of the city old age homes, which are generally a lot easier to get into and don't cost as much. There's been lots of abuse and lots of horrible things going on there. Then you talk about the private ones. You know, not everybody has $5,000 or $6,000 to go and live the rest of their days in these luxury units.
Do you think as well that it may be because it is, especially in the public sector, it becomes a financial burden on the government, for example? Like,
absolutely.
If old people can't afford their retirement, as I've come to learn, then the government steps in and kicks in money to cover it.
Yes.
I guess their priorities are kind of all over the place. But, you know, that's a whole podcast. Oh, my God. I mean, we're in the election year, but we're not quite there yet. That's just a whole another bag. Don't let those cats out, Jason Katz. I didn't even mean to do that.
Right.
Okay, so let's get into current news events.
Yes.
We're off the market, but of course it's like intrinsically linked. How are you seeing the movements in this country as well as our neighbors to the south?
Yeah. So listen, I'll start by saying that the first rung on our ladder has been significantly eroded, and that is the condos and the rentals. So a lot of people, you know, it made the news, but a lot of people are not talking about it. But 320,000 Indian foreign exchange students have been told that their visas are not being renewed and that they need to go home.
Yeah.
That is going to free up a lot of rentals.
Yeah.
Right? It's going to free up a lot of people that were sitting on these units, and we don't really know what effect that is going to have, because our trade up buyers typically might buy a condo. And then they rent out that condo and they take that cash flow and they use that to get into their second property. But what happens if there's a disconnect with that first property and there's nobody to rent it?
Yeah, and I think I've spoken about it before. To your point of like investors, you know, when interest rates were low, and they were doing a lot of buying and they were doing a lot of leveraging against their own investment properties.
Of course.
Because they were inflated value because the rates were so low.
Yes.
Then the interest rates went up. So yes, it's made it harder on the individual that has the one mortgage. Fine. But the good news, well, depends how you look at it. It shook those investors out of the trees when it started to deflate their properties.
Right.
They had to, you know, lease them out, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of followed that pattern. Now, of course, it's going to cycle in again. But, you know, it levels the playing field. You know, whether it's positive or negative, that's completely up to you.
Right.
Some people are all like, you know, screw the investors. But there are people too. They're doing business just like everyone else. That's the way it goes. So we are seeing, that's a huge change. You know, students getting permanent residency following the postgrads and all that kind of stuff.
Yes.
The parents of the students buying them properties, especially from East Asia and China, using that loophole for their own selves, and it makes sense to me why they do that, buying a property rather than giving them the money for rent.
Why they did. They were able to for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's a whole nother podcast about China's economy and where it's going to. But, all to say that it's affected us, and this is the way that we're going. Of course, you want to speak on the current trade war, Jason Katz.
Well, listen, I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Trump announced the tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Trudeau flew down, had a meeting with him at Mar-a-Lago. Sheinbaum from Mexico flew down, had a meeting in Mar-a-Lago, and everything was kind of halted. So we revisit it in 30 days. What do I think is going to happen? I think this was a negotiating strategy. I think this was an opportunity for Trump to get his two closest trading partners to the table and to send a message to the European Union, which he has yet to negotiate trade with, in order to send the message of, oh my goodness, look what he's doing to his two closest trading partners. His two allies, what is he going to do to us? And we need to prepare for this. So, all this talk about the 51st state and all of that, I think is a joke.
I just can't understand. Like, there is a lot of things, we are getting too political. It's just so disrespectful to completely write off an entire nation. Sure, the country's young.
Yeah.
Well, it's not much younger than America.
Well, that's it. It's not, what I'm saying? Sure, it's not as robust. We don't have as many people. Fine. But, it's just, I just can't believe that has been said, As a brand new Canadian citizen, it's hurtful.
Yeah. It's hurtful, but it's also, we have to kind of be honest with ourselves. And as a country, on the macro level, we're doing a very good job right now of sending a message to the rest of the world that says, if you have aspirations of business, if you feel that you want to be one of those noble people who are going to employ others and give them an incredible life, we're sending the message right now, don't come to Canada. Because it is not a favorable place for business. It's not a favorable place to get ahead, and everybody is starving. It's kind of the message.
Right. But who's sending that message?
I would say that the policies of the Canadian government is sending that message. Yeah.
And why would they do that?
We have become viewed as an incredibly left-leaning government and economy.
Okay.
And I think the other thing that upsets Trump and upsets people in the United States is the fact that we seem to not have a handle on all of the political unrest that we see in our streets. Protesters, people that are anti-Western philosophies, seem to be given a much stronger voice here in Canada than anywhere else in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that worries the United States. And it should worry their people.
You know what's sad to me? I lived here 10 years now, so I can probably speak to it. But it just seems like Canada has always been the friendly nation, and I think that's a beautiful quality for a country to have. And we don't rustle too many feathers and this and that. And we love hockey, whatever else it is. There's plenty of nuance to Canada, and it's got its own character.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people, and as you're saying, have come to this country and have taken advantage of that.
In a big way.
Has the government let that happen in varying degrees, in various forms? It's hard to paint it all with the same brush. But it just seems like it's been taken advantage. If you ask for my opinion, I feel like this city specifically, it's very varied in different provinces and different cities. I just feel like the 90s was like peak Toronto. Mid-90s. You're going to disagree with me. You can jump in and say, I don't agree. I just feel like a lot of things were happening. But by what I see when homes were built and when things were happening, and I just felt like they just went into cruise control, and I don't think they planned for the future. That's evident in the TTC system. And I'm not one to complain about any of that.
Yeah.
It's just the way that it's gone. For example, like there's no road tunnels underneath the city, which would like incredibly change how we look at commuting and all that.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Or like we have been progressing a lot, and I've seen huge changes even from, we like to look at a period from like 2015 to now, for example.
Right.
That's a nice snapshot because there's like pre, middle, teens, and after.
Yeah.
Just that's how I feel. Do you agree with that?
I'd agree. I would agree to an extent. I think that the period of time that you're referencing was really about building Toronto. And then if we take a look at a segment of, say, 2010 to now, it's about infill. And it's about, there's a little piece over here, so let's build a condo. And let's really build up Yonge and Eglinton, which is kind of what we've seen.
Yeah. And there's two sides to that, because on the one side, I just feel like the infrastructure wasn't following. Like, yes, there was a need for homes, fine, that's the priority. I looked at a stat where, like, the hospital downtowns, or the limited amount of hospitals, can't keep up with the amount of people or the condos that were going in.
Yeah, I would agree.
And there is a disconnect in planning or whatever it is between, okay, let's rubber stamp all these condos, which they did, in the 2010s. They were just rubber stamping. I get that.
Yeah.
We had an emergency for building homes, and let's get them up. But, we see the ill side effects of that, which is, not all of them, but some of them poorly constructed condos, glass panes falling off onto, and things getting done too quickly.
What does the life look like when you're actually living in these condos? Like, there's no grocery store nearby, or there's no lifestyle there.
Right.
There's nothing. It's just barren land, and just like full of condos. Like Yonge and like Jane and Highway 7. It's just condos on top of condos on top of condos.
Yeah.
Like, what does life look like when you're
and I'm like,
there?
okay, there's in that area that Jess is referring to, Concord, there's a Balzac's cafe. There's one cafe servicing. Okay, everyone has a lot of coffee machines at home. Fine. But there's one cafe servicing like 10 condos now.
Yeah, life is more than just your little, especially in a condo, isn't your 500 square foot. You want to have like a lifestyle around that.
Totally.
What does that look
Sounds
like?
like life is good for Balzac. So.
Yeah.
10 condos feeding.
That's it. I mean, there is the other side to this. The other side to this is, thankfully, nowadays when they plan condos, they plan parkettes and they plan mixed commercial retail in the bottom. So now we have the salons or the coffee shops or whatever else. That's nice. That's nice to see.
Yeah.
Rather than just the amenities or whatever. So there is the positives to it, and I think they're learning from that. It's just ill-planned, I think.
Everything that you're talking about in parallel is, in my view, driven by immigration. And immigration is the only thing that we have had working for us, if we agree that it's worked for us.
Yeah.
I would say over the past 10 years. That has been the plan. Immigration will fix everything. Bring these people in.
They'll spend money.
There are government programs that are going to pay for them, and it's a cycle, and they're going to put money back into the economy. And that's not what's happening.
And you need a labor force to grow it.
You
and
need
expand.
a labor force. Yes.
And just like in many countries, Western countries in the world, everyone seems to be attracted to the one spot. In Canada, it's crazy to me. There's, in my opinion, one major city, and it's Toronto. If we really think about it, there are other minor cities that are trying to get there. But, okay, we can look at Innisfail, Barrie as like new hubs close to the GTA.
Yes.
But what's going to be built to truly attract, these immigrants, and what level of value do they bring? Is it labor force, just basic manufacturing and retail? Is it high skilled jobs? That's the thing that we're grappling with right now.
Yeah. I mean, I think to answer honestly, up until this point, a lot of what we've seen has been Tim Hortons. They're working at the fast food restaurants that other people don't want to work at.
Yeah.
Is that going to change? I don't think so. Every country, every economy has an appetite for cheaper labor. Right? It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
I don't know that we're ever going to get away from that as long as that exists as an option.
Yeah. And, in connection with the states, all their ICE raids and all the things they're doing, the DOGE, removing unskilled as well as skilled labor. Are they going to start coming to the Canada? You know what I mean? That could be positive and negative.
Could be.
We could attract a lot of skilled migrants.
Yeah.
That would help us expand and grow the country.
Absolutely.
So that's yet to see.
I would say that the one elephant in the room that we have not talked about that make things very, very difficult in order to build here are the development fees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the consumer doesn't understand what the development fees really are.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a stat right now, when you build a detached home in Toronto, your development fee is 30%. So if you're building a $1 million house, which you wouldn't even be building a $1 million house,
No.
you're building a $2 million. But if you're building a $1 million house, you are writing a check for $300,000 to the government.
Mm.
Wow.
Conversely, if they're building a high-rise condo unit and a one-bedroom, it's got 100 one-bedrooms in there, each one of those one-bedroom units is $60,000 development fee.
Yeah.
So why is the price so high here? Why are we paying so much? Because the developers are paying these fees, and the developers are then passing the fee on to the consumer.
Yeah. And who's getting that fee? The
The
government at a federal level.
Absolutely.
And what are they doing with that money?
So think about it, during the lead up and the height of the market from like 2014 to 2017 when everything crashed.
Mm-hmm.
Think of the land transfer tax
Yeah. Oh, I do.
that the government was taking with every single transaction.
And if you're selling it with like a year or 2 years, it's the same property, whether it's the same land or in the air.
And over and over.
It's over and over again. And what are they doing with that money? Jason just threw his hands up. You can't hear that.
Maybe
you hear it.
I couldn't even tell
The
you.
silence is
I
enough.
couldn't tell you.
And there's still potholes in Toronto roads.
Absolutely.
And they're raising the taxes again.
Yeah.
I don't mind who gets in. Well, obviously I mind, but I just wanted one quality. Whoever comes in, they need to be decisive. They need to have teeth. They need to have the guts and determination to fight. Developers not get too corrupt or any of that kind of stuff. This is a future city. It is. We're being. It's almost like Toronto's being pulled into it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're expecting it. We're here. We're not as big as New York or any of those major cities like that. We are like New York light, I would argue. And I just think they need to really bring some minds into this. Now, I don't know who that's going to be, but I just think they need to take that passivity out of politics and become more.
Yeah.
I
agree.
Is that too much to ask for?
Shouldn't be.
Shouldn't be. Is that
Shouldn't be.
is that possible? You think it's possible?
I think you're dealing with too much money.
Yeah.
And I think anytime you're dealing with that large amount of money,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to get abused.
But it's almost like they weren't expecting it. And then it came, and then it was like a frenzy of money. Oh my God, all this money. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't respect the money that was coming in.
Right.
Because they could have done things, look at the Metro links. Look at the cross-city LRT.
Yeah.
I can't believe that. And I don't like to compare apples to apples, but it started in the same year and almost the same month as the rail revamp in Sydney, Australia.
Right.
Okay, slightly different project, but pretty much the same thing. They had to put rails in. They're in highly developed areas where there's not a lot of expensive real estate. They got to put a lot of infrastructure. Okay, the one in the GTA had an extra 5 stops. I think it was 25 stops to Sydney's 19 stops. And Sydney got it done in 6 years. What are we year 14 now?
Yeah.
For this project.
Mm-hmm.
So what happened? And I always talk about. I'm maybe the rental contracts. There's too much money in that.
See, there's no accountability. We
Mm-hmm.
stop and start contracts all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But it
Pay
just
them out.
surprises me. It just surprises me.
Yeah.
That obviously the CEO of Metrolink stepped down. He got another job very quickly. Wow, that's the quickest thing he's done. But
Yeah.
But how is that? How is it so tolerated? Obviously a lot of people complaining. Just seems like something's missing.
Yeah.
The edge. You know?
I do.
Are you and I going to fix these problems on the podcast today?
Probably not today.
But I think it starts with a conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I think it starts, as you said, like being honest with yourself. And to kind of round out the point, I think one of the positives coming from this whole tariff thing is a renewed sense of nationalism, which I think is overdue. A lot of people are allowed to say a lot of negative things. And sure, there are negatives, that things that needs to be fixed, but there's also a lot of beautiful things about this country that should be celebrated. And, you know, some politicians have been making some points. We have a lot of natural resources here.
We do.
We should be focusing on that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But, again, that's a whole other conversation. So, jumping into, we've kind of already breached the topic of the future of real estate. But let's talk about, where did we come from, Jason? You've been in this gig 11 years, and you understand, you've been in previous businesses. Where have we come from in relation to real estate?
Well, you know, I think we've gone through kind of a hyper period of enhancements to real estate as a whole. You know, when I think of the pandemic, it was our first opportunity to go and actually transact using apps like DocuSign.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, virtual signing, which has now been adopted by all lawyers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all lawyers are able to meet with their clients now. They record the entire thing. You know, so that's something that that changed big time.
Yeah.
And really made our jobs much more efficient.
It's almost like the Department of DOGE came in and
Almost.
made things efficient.
But we
Listen, I
think into
remember.
the future, like, we needed that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
running around, signing documents.
I clearly, vividly remember 2013, 2014, driving around for signatures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it would
One
be 1 o'clock in the
mistake.
morning, 1:30, and you're back and forth and back and forth. So the
Much wasted
virtual
time.
signing really has helped.
Now, there are still some agents
There are some.
in this industry that are skeptical.
Yeah.
I don't trust that DocuSign.
Yeah. Hey, listen, some clients want to do it in person too.
Yeah. Now, to take it back, I guess a little bit further, as I understand it, brokerages are very, like, insular with their information. To get the listings, you know, we're talking way back,
Mm-hmm.
these 80s, 90s, these real foundational proving grounds for some of these industries. You know, you didn't have the information of, like, what house was listed until you went to the brokerage, right?
Correct.
You weren't any part of any of that?
I wasn't. That was before my time, but what
Yeah.
you're referring to are what are called tear sheets.
Tear sheets, yeah.
And tear sheets used to show up at every brokerage early in the morning,
Mhm.
and the agents would come in order to find out
Yeah.
what was listed yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in contrast, obviously, anyone can jump on MLS or at least the Realtor.ca, which is
Yes.
the public side of it,
Yeah.
type in an address, and for the most part, they can quite easily find.
Yeah,
Any
consumers are
information.
much more in it. They're seeing things come on the market
Yeah.
the second they're on the market.
Yeah.
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 What consumers don't understand when they take a look at those numbers that are simply posted online is the context that
Mhm.
exists with each and every one of those transactions.
Right,
Because
right.
they're all very different.
And how Sigma they had a run at predicting prices, which was an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
I'd
they
say
just
it
shouldn't
was
do
probably accurate 10% of the time, and it requires, like, the algorithm is just, it's not complex enough to
Yeah.
be able to understand offer presentations, for example.
Exactly.
You know, I think they were just maybe using off historical records of 97% of list price in a traditional market
Absolutely.
kind of deal. It might work further rural out where things move a little bit slower, a bit more predictable, but
Yeah. Even a broken clock is right twice a day.
yeah, there you go.
Exactly.
I love that. So we had the tearaway sheets, now we have the more connectedness. We have the ability to reach agents in the first place.
Yes.
Now you can just go onto a listing, find the agent, or they're advertised, they're in your face anyways.
Mm-hmm.
We now have a lot more agents. Actually, last year was the first year that we had a decline in agents.
Yes. And that is something that we're going to continue to see.
And, you know, you had a stat before we started talking today. There's a high chance that 70% of the agents that are active, let's call it, it's hard to say because some of them are active, non-active, in varying degrees.
Mm-hmm.
70% of them, you said, did zero
You know
transactions
what?
last
Let's say with confidence 50.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
50%.
over 50%.
So
did
we're
zero
talking the people on TikTok, especially
Yeah.
the fresh agents, the ones that, oh, real estate's so easy. I'm going to get these leads. I'm going to put this TikTok channel. I'm going to start showing homes.
Yes.
I'm just gonna watch the checks come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, as a consumer, you really have to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Because that is a trap. You know, you've
It's a
got
trap.
somebody who's in front of you who's leading you to believe that they are capable of achieving a result. You're going to find out on your watch.
Yeah.
It's too late.
Yeah.
And I always say, I use the analogy. It's like opening a cookie store in the corner. Okay, what's the name of the cookies? What kind of cookies do you sell? You know, do you have all the baking equipment? How are you going to advertise that? There's 100 cookie places in the GTA. How are you going to be different? People don't realize that, I think. Or I'm going to do it part-time. The thing I hear a lot, I'll just get my license. It's almost like it needs to be more expensive to get your license.
Yeah.
To detract a lot of these.
Yeah.
And it's a trap for them too. It's not even a trap for the consumer, it's a trap for them. Because they go in thinking, oh, I could do this. And listen, some people are successful out of that. Good, like us. Right? Or we like to think we are anyways. Award-winning at the very least.
Wow. And it wasn't in the first year. Like, it takes time.
Hey, speak for yourself, Jess.
Oh, that's true. You had a very good first
We've
couple
got
years.
4 out of 5 years. We've got awards, which we're quite proud of. And I'm staring at Jason Katz's awards.
I know, like a wall of awards.
And I think that the narrative needs to change for new agents so they fully understand what's involved. It's not just a creative TikTok fun, you know. It's building the business from the ground up.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I strongly believe that, you know, when a new agent comes into our brokerage, I would highly recommend that they link up with agents who know what they're doing so that they can learn.
Yeah.
You know, there would be nothing worse than being able, you know, just going out there representing yourself. I don't know anything.
Yeah.
Come transact with me.
Well, I was very lucky to have Jess with me. She was my mentor. Still is.
We're each other's
now
mentors.
we mentor each other.
Yeah. That's how I started. I went under other agents' wings who were much more experienced than me. I went on listing presentations with them. I went on showings with them. I went door knocking with them. I listened and I listened and I listened until I understood what was actually happening. Because when you study, you don't have any experience.
And we had this funny dynamic when I was studying for my license. We had this funny dynamic of, like, what I was learning was so old school, some of it. Some of it's fundamentals, never going to change. I get that. I appreciate it. Some of it was so old school, and I would bring it up to Jess. She would get so mad. She'd be like, don't. That's ridiculous. You don't need to know that, or that's wrong, or, you know, whatever it is. They've changed the curriculum now. I've heard. How much I've changed, I'm not sure, but...
He's learning about meets and bounds.
Meets and bounds change. Listen, it's nice to know where we've come from. That's why I like to talk about the past, talk about the future.
Yes.
But it's definitely changed in terms of, like, closing, for example. You used to have to go to the lawyer's office
to go get the
keys.
Yep.
Now you get the keys from the lockbox. And just these efficiencies that just make so much sense.
Absolutely.
You know? DocuSign, getting the deposit. I used to go get the deposit from people. I mean, that's nice. It's a nice thing.
Yep.
Congratulations, shake their hands, give them a bottle of wine or, you know, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But now it's like, just go to the bank and get it done.
Yep.
Direct deposit. Easy.
Absolutely.
It's like when I first came to this country, and I guess it still is for some matter, I hadn't seen check before. My dad used to have checks in the 90s.
Yeah.
He used to pay occasionally on groceries or something ridiculous like that with a check.
Right.
Which seems like wild to me.
Yeah.
And then I never had checkbook myself at all because we just had Interac like a long time ago in Australia.
Yep.
Came here and people are like paying things by checks.
Rentals.
It just kind of scratched my head. But sometimes you need these periods of transition or challenge to truly make things more efficient and better.
Appreciate the DocuSign now.
Yeah.
Because you've been through the other way.
Yeah, exactly.
I would scan an offer 15 times. By the time it was done, there was nothing left of it.
So would you say there's different periods in real estate in Toronto? We can go back to the 60s and the 70s, and, you know, things have changed over the years. Let's concentrate on the last 10 years. What have you seen happen specifically in the last 10 years? Because it's quite important.
I would say the last 10 years, really the price increases. You know, the price increases and the price increases not keeping up with salaries.
Cost of living.
You know, making it that much more difficult with the move-up buyers now need to have maybe a couple of condos under their belt that they've bought and sold in order to have enough for that down payment for that small house that they want to get into next.
Getting into your forever home just doesn't seem as feasible as it did.
Yeah, and I also find that I think people are they're kind of settling for what they're saying is their dream home and their forever home that they're going to stay in.
Right.
And it might not be as nice of a home as they really want.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, they're kind of just making do.
We're in the position where, like, now been through a few condos into the townhouse, and the next move up seems to be impossible. And maybe 10 years ago it wouldn't have been.
Right.
Because now the jump between just, like, the 3-bedroom townhouse to, like, a 4-bedroom detached home is just, it's getting too large in between.
Yes.
And then, obviously, like, the mortgage on our home now compared to what the mortgage on this new purchase price would be, it's just the gap seems too large, and that's a realistic thing. That's, I think, anyone in their 30s is going through a very similar thing. If you bought, you bought 10 years ago, it's different if you bought 6 years ago, if you bought 4 years ago, like, every year it changes what it looks like.
Yeah, it's like when we got into our townhouse, it was before a big jump.
Yeah.
And we were lucky, like, it's just, had it been today, I don't think we could have afforded that.
The purchase price in 2020 compared to the purchase price in 2025, like, it's just not comparable. And
then there's, like, the pre-2015 stuff as well that was like, Jess bought, we had a whole podcast on this. Jess bought her first condo for $265,000. $268, excuse me. And her parents freaked out because it was more than what they paid for their house, detached home, in the 80s.
My dad thought my $230,000 mortgage was nuts.
Nutso. And then, what'd you sell it for, Jess?
$395. I didn't sell it for a lot, but it was.
And who would have thought that it would have been?
Yeah, in like 3 years. Yeah.
That was downtown. That was Dan Leckie there. Iconic.
That's wild. We bought our first house at King Road and Bathurst in 2001 for $320,000. And that was an end unit townhouse.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And just like purchase price now, 1.3, 1.4?
1.2, yeah.
Okay.
And the measurement that is most relative is, as we talked about before, how many years of paying for your bills and money left over to maybe, top up anniversary payments on mortgages, whatever that is. Whatever it looks like to pay off your home, how many years with that current salary is it going to take? And I tell you what, the relativity.
But it's also a decision.
Crazy.
Like, again, my parents would say, if we ever had a little extra money, we did a double mortgage payment. If we ever had a little extra, we did an anniversary payment. And now we're like, if we have a little extra, maybe we go and enjoy our life. So the priorities change.
Yeah, totally.
And because the mortgage is now so large, it doesn't feel like you're going to get it down enough to make it worth it. So, like, that, I think that's maybe a choice a lot of people make. Like, my mortgage is so big, I'm not paying it down in the next 20 years, so why would I waste $20,000 to put it onto the mortgage when I can go and, enjoy my life a little bit better?
Yeah. And that's another thing now, like, there's just so many extra expenses that are possible in the first place. What people choose to do, Uber Eats or, good food or cable, whatever the things are that you choose to pay for, that's your own decision. But, just the standard of living has changed, or the expected standard of living.
The paying off your mortgage mentality, I think, is a previous generation's mentality. I don't think people in our world think about that right now. I mean, obviously, the dream is to have no mortgage by the time you retire, of course. But I know, like, I'm Italian. That's like, mortgage is like a bad word.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like, as fast as we can pay down the mortgage, it's their only goal. It doesn't matter if we barely eat. If we're paying down the mortgage, we're doing okay.
Yes.
And your lifestyle, your means has to support those changes more now than ever. But again, like, your parents, they could have moved into maybe a bigger house at some point and had more. It's all relative. Yeah. It's all relative. They stayed in the same house.
Exactly.
Which
people don't do as
Which
often now.
Has pros and cons to it, I think.
Yeah. They're not moving every 5 years to get into the bigger, the better, having a bigger mortgage. Like, they were like, this is good enough, and then that's it. Well,
I want to do a whole podcast on this, and I will, and I've done the first time home buyer kind of focus before. I've done it many times. But I read an article on, I'm with Wealthsimple, and they give me the newsletters, and I read an article on, does it make more sense to rent or does it make more sense to buy? And there's something like, if it takes 17 years or less, like, if you're comparing your rental amount versus how much it would cost to buy it. And if you're comparing your mortgage repayment to a rental payment, and if it's going to take you longer than like 23 years to pay it off, then it's not worth it. Maybe it's better to rent until you find yourself in a new position. Conversely, if it's like 20 years, 17 years or less, it's going to make more sense to buy. And I think the huge gap in all of this is education. And this is kind of the first like tether of passion that I picked up for this industry is I never really was taught anything about real estate. And I knew I had to figure it out to be an adult, you know, just like many things like taxes and whatever else. And I knew it was one thing that I just had to figure out and know. And subconsciously, my parents were teaching me about real estate because they were making those moves, completely different to Jess's parents. My parents were making money moves here, and then they divide that semi into like two sections, and now they're renting it out. And, you know, whatever it is, we were renting when they still owned property. And, you know, whatever the money move was, that was the only education I had. And other than that, like, no one's really teaching. You know what? It's still to this day, friends that we have, their parents are teaching them that condos are scary and all these other things. Again, like these inherited kind of value system about real estate. And it's got to change.
It does.
And it starts with us.
That's what we're doing on this podcast. We're trying.
So we've seen it change a lot in the last 10 years, for better or for worse. We've talked about a lot of the economic factors and all the things. Just the identity shift, I think, and who's coming here and why they're coming here is huge. You know, the pandemic you touched on, that was a huge changing factor. It made things a lot more efficient. What are we seeing like today in 2025, the shifts that are happening?
I would say currently we're seeing everybody sitting on their hands, waiting to see what's going to happen with Trump and these tariffs, waiting. You know, there's a lot of uncertainty right now.
Election results, maybe.
Election results, absolutely. I think that the banks and the brokers are going to continue to make things easier for Canadians to get into property. We don't want to see that situation where all of this property floods the market and the price that everybody thought they were going to get, they now no longer get.
Yeah.
Back to the point of everybody doing everything at the same time.
Yeah.
So do it now if you can.
Yeah, do it when it makes sense.
You know,
to
I think an excellent analogy would be a condo. So you have all these people, they buy a pre-construction condo, they buy it 4 years out. Now the first 3 or 4 floors start to get residency and they're able to move in, and everybody does the same thing. I'm going to rent my unit out for $3,500 a month, going on the market right now. And you take a look at MLS, and there's 28 units in this building, and they're at $2,700. And the smart investors start calling around. Hey, what can you do better? Can you do better on price? Better on price? Better on price? And all of a sudden, 27 is 25, and then 25 is 23. And everybody rents at 23 because that's the number. Because everybody did the same thing at the same time. And everybody's losing money on their unit. We don't want to get into that situation in real estate.
The counter argument to that is, I always say, it can take a lot longer for prices to truly come down. Like we're talking a year, 6 months. But all it takes is one good comparable. All of a sudden, that place is rented an extra $50 higher than what we expected. The next one comes out. And we're talking weeks, not months and years. You know. So, and I think that's the two major factors. But again, you're right. Like, it's easy to see that prices of 2022 and get, oh, well, that's when they sold. Or maybe you bought then, you know?
Right.
If you got unlucky with timing.
Yes.
And that's the push and pull factor. But, you know, I just don't like the narrative of this is a tough market. The market is negative because it's slow. Well, it's slow for some of you. If you want to sell your home, maybe that's slow.
But as a buyer.
But as a buyer, it's the best market. Oh, you mean I don't have to like see that house like within an hour or it's going to be gone for an extra $200,000 what I expected it to go for? Sure, that's good for sellers. But even the sellers in those scenarios, unless you're an exclusion to the fact, you still have to buy in that same market. You're now probably settling, whether you're going up or down, you're settling into something. You're competing on that side. I don't think anyone likes those markets. You know?
I agree.
At least we have a bit of balance. And I think people have learned. I think the mentality people have learned from the fear of missing out markets we can be a little bit more conservative. You know? Okay, so what's we're going a little long here, but I think this is all really, really good stuff. This is a really important. What are your bold predictions for the future, Jason Katz?
Bold predictions. I think that condos are going to continue to soften this year. They're going to soften essentially until houses are deemed too expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When people say this is it, oh, we're at the top of the market, this is absolutely crazy, these prices are nuts, then you're going to see them focus on condos again.
Mm-hmm.
How far are we away from that? Based on the way that things are kind of heading right now, I would expect a very, very busy fall and back to school.
What do you think about spring as we're heading into it right now?
Listen, I think that anybody that wants to do a transaction this year, wants to sell their home, would be wise to get it on in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of push that up again so that everybody's not doing the same thing at the same time.
You want to be ahead of the momentum, not behind it.
Actually, you want to create the momentum,
Create the
not
momentum.
react to it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, very, very interesting things to talk about today. I guess we'll have to end it there, Jess.
Yeah, we could talk forever.
We could just talk forever. There's so many podcasts and so many ideas and stuff.
Indeed. Well, thank you very much for having me on the show
coming.
today.
Yeah, appreciate
That was
it.
great. Thank you.
Now, if you guys have any other questions, reach out. We've had people reach out in the past. It's great. Yeah, we love to hear from you. Don't be afraid. Don't be conservative with your thoughts.
Only if they're nice.
Elect to ask questions, and you can reach out Hickson Real Estate Team at gmail.com. Hit us up on socials at Hickson Real Estate on Instagram, TikTok, all those fancy places.
And Jason, what's your handle on Instagram if anyone wants to follow you?
I would be Jason Katz Homes.
Perfect.
Jason Katz Homes. He's
Jason
selling
Katz
homes.
Homes?
Katz.
That's correct.
And I'd say he's probably the coolest cat in here.
Oh, for sure.
He's cool. He's catty.
I appreciate that.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you.